This is Nick from Pray for Sound.
This is Bruce from Pray for Sound.
Hi, this is Chris from Pray for Sound.
This is Steve from Pray for Sound.
Hey, this is Joe from Pray for Sound.
And you're listening to the Waiting Room Commentary. We decided to do Waiting Room because coming off of our European tour, we got into the studio to start working on some new songs, and we all felt pretty burnt out.
We started working on this record because we were working on some music and it felt really stale.
We started working on new full band stuff and found ourselves stuck in a little bit of a rut, so
We wanted to take a step back from that and focus specifically on something new for us.
We wrote Waiting Room so that we could try to write songs in a different style and basically see what happens.
The name of the album Waiting Room came from a couple different places. One is that, similar to sitting in a waiting room, there's that anticipation, and we didn't really know what was coming next for our band, and we could kind of feel that anticipation of not really being sure what was next. And the reason I say anticipation as an association with waiting room is because Bruce came up with the title while he was sitting in the waiting room of an emergency room at a hospital waiting for his son to come out. His son needed stitches, and so we just felt like the title really fit because of how, unsure, on edge we kind of were about the whole thing. Ultimately, we're really happy that we decided to do what we did. The first track on the record is a song called Heywood, and it's one that I started working on about 2 years prior to even discussions of Waiting Room. And it was because I'd been listening to a lot of ambient music on the ambient Pandora station and kind of was trying to get my feet wet in something like that, something sort of in that direction, but everything I do is very guitar based, so there's a guitar line that sort of carries throughout the whole song, and around it I got the opportunity to mess with different synths and patterns and reverbs and things like that. The original demo sounded a lot smaller. It didn't sound as wide as the full version, and I remember really sort of fighting for the song when the conversation came up about working on new music. I said, well, I've had this demo in my back pocket for a little while, and I'd really like to work on it for this. I brought it into everyone. We tracked guitar, we tracked a little bit of synth that I'd done on my own on my laptop, and then Steve, our drummer and producer, just started using all these different reverbs and chambers and just really filling out the sound in a way that I couldn't do on my own. And I remember taking those tracks home, that first bounce of it, and just being so in awe of how much space he got there to be in that song. And I was pretty excited, and that in my mind, that first song really kind of captures what the whole record was trying to do, just this open space kind of filled with sound. The name of the song comes from the character Heywood Floyd in 2001, The Space Odyssey. And at the time I'd just been reading that whole book series, and I thought the name just sounded nice and just kind of fit what I was working on at the time. The next track on the record is a song called Sky, and it's also one that I worked on right around the same time as Heywood, and it just started as that guitar riff that kind of opens the song just over and over again. And for the most part, the original demo was just that guitar part. It wasn't until I sort of decided after doing the Heywood demo that I wanted to experiment a little bit more with the ambience of that song, and I added in a couple of just piano chords, really light sounding, and then a couple other pads. There's a really, really high guitar part that's sent through a lot of reverb that's in the background, and I really just wanted it to be really light and fluffy. And I originally pushed for there being no percussion on the song. We eventually got Steve in there, and what he does at the end of the song, I feel really makes that track.
Oh yeah, this song needed more movement. Put some 16th note clicks in there. Yeah, we kept it really simple. We didn't want to do too much. Just something to kind of give it a lift a couple minutes in.
It's kind of just meant to be that way. It's meant to be very empty, and it's kind of meant to have space that isn't necessarily filled up, especially coming right after Heywood, where we really try and fill space with pianos and synths. And it was kind of nice to have the second track on the record just kind of push the record along in a nice way without really being too overbearing. The name Sky, I think, just came from sort of, imagining myself lying on my back and kind of looking at the clouds. I know that sounds cheesy, but that's honestly what I was thinking at the time. The next track on the record was a track called Lusitania, and it was primarily orchestrated by Bruce and Chris, if I remember correctly.
Am I good to go?
Yeah.
Lusitania was mostly born out of experimenting with a couple of the cool pieces of gear we have at the studio we happen to own and run together. We have this great synth called a Korg Minilogue. It has a built-in sequencer, so we started it on the loop of notes that you hear in Lusitania. And we also had a really great reverb effect called the Mercury 7, which was actually modeled after the sounds heard in Blade Runner. So we used that to kind of drown out the sequence, and then had a lot of fun getting everyone involved to fill out the extra layers in the song and turn into what you hear on the record now.
I think over time we decided to add percussion, over time we decided to add acoustic guitar, but it really took a long time to figure out because we had this really long piece. It was almost like we had too many options, like it was just so long and so repetitive that we could do all these different things. I really like what we settled on because I think the song has a really interesting crescendo. It doesn't blow up where I expect it to blow up, and that's really the only heavy percussion on the record rather is in that song, Steve's drum parts. And the way they come in, I think, matches the mood of this song. It's probably the darkest song on the record, the most brooding song, I would say. Trees is actually my favorite song on the record, and this one means a lot to me for a couple different reasons. The song was written in the winter of, I'm pretty sure, 2017, early 2017, right before our first European tour. And at the time, I was really kind of bogged down with school and work, and the winters in New England can get pretty harsh, so I remember feeling just like I'd been stuck inside for months and just wasn't playing much music at all. And I picked up my guitar and I threw the capo on a random fret and just started messing around. And I came up with that first chord line that opens the song. And it was like right away I knew that I had something that I was happy with and something that felt really good. And the first thing I thought when I was playing it was, oh, this really reminds me of Trees. I'm not quite sure why. It was just kind of, I guess like what I saw in my head when I was playing this riff. And I wrote the first chord and the second chord and I just played it over and over back and forth, and I was really, really happy with it. Later that day, my girlfriend comes over and I'm like, hey, let me show you something I just started working on. And I play her the riff and she's like, whoa, I really like that. It really reminds me of like Trees. And I was like, done. Song name accomplished. So from there, I just took it and sat down and worked out the rest of the arrangement, recorded on my laptop, and spent a lot of time just kind of experimenting with different melodies and via piano or via synth and finding out ways that I could layer them. And then I got all these new guitar ideas and all this other stuff. And originally I had a percussion idea, but I think the way that it all panned out without it ended up being the way that we were all the happiest with and the way that I was happiest with in the moment for sure. We were able to do a full band version of it that's available on a compilation by Thousand Arms called Open Language Volume 4, and it's something that we actually just released a little while ago. I'm really excited that we're able to have that version of the song out there because it was cool to take something that we were all really happy with and kind of reinvent it in a new way, or try out something that had been kind of in my head from the beginning. But the way that the song is on Waiting Room is definitely my favorite version of it. We got a really cool opportunity to experiment with synths and piano and other guitar lines, clean guitar lines, in a way that we hadn't quite yet, and it really helped inform a lot of that experimentation that we did on our following release. Grayson was a song that came out of, again, the winter. This time it was winter of 2018, and there was a snowstorm, actually, that caused me to not be able to go into work, and I'm pretty sure the snowstorm was called Grayson, like that was the name of the storm at the time. At this point, I think we'd had the rest of the songs on Waiting Room set, and someone said, I kind of wish we had like one more song or something to put on this, and I was like, well, I kind of feel like it's done, like I feel like we've done everything we could have wanted to do. I think Joe messaged back and was like, I think we might work on one like maybe while you're away, because I was about to go on a trip, and I was like kind of just sitting at home thinking about that, and I was like, like I feel like if they really want to work on another song, like maybe I've got one more in my back pocket. And I'd had this idea earlier to do something that was those 3 piano stabs in those particular chords that happen. And then I kind of all at once, I got the idea for the whole song, the percussion, everything that I wanted it to be. So I ran downstairs and basically spent the whole day just working on this song. And if it only felt right to call it Grayson, because I wouldn't have had the time to work on that song had that snowstorm not happened, and who knows what they may have done otherwise. One of the things that I've heard the most about this song, believe it or not, in fact, when people tell us that they like Waiting Room or that they've enjoyed Waiting Room, the one complaint I hear about is the drums on Grayson. But no one seems to like the drums on Grayson, with the exception of my friend Dan. My friend Dan is the only one who's commented saying he's fine with the drums. I don't know if people feel like it kills the mood. I don't know. It felt right to me at the time, and I dig it, and I like going back and listening to it. This one was pretty fun because, if I remember correctly, there's this one note guitar that just plays throughout the entire song. For some reason, it's just one note. I just couldn't quite get it right. It wouldn't stay in time or in tune or something. So it was like down to the wire. We're like, want to mix and finish this record and get it mastered. And I'm listening to it like, God, something's wrong with that one note. And so I think Bruce was at the studio by himself. He just quickly retracked it and looped it. And that's the one that's on the record now, because I just couldn't seem to get that one note. I'm not sure why. It's like of all the tracks on the record, just that literally this one note looped was like the bane of my existence for a little while. Empty Spaces was a track that Bruce sent us basically the way it is now.
So you could just tell me about your process writing it or anything about it. Okay. So Empty Spaces was just an attempt at a very simple song, one guitar, where I wanted to experiment with lo-fi sounds and like a warbly record kind of vibe. No, so I was just looking to use basic chords to make something that sounded pretty.
I listened to what he sent us and I was like, this is done. Like, this doesn't need anything. I think this totally accomplishes what you want. He was like, no, I really want to try adding like electronic drums or synth or like something to it. And I was like, nope, the song is done. And I'm not quite sure why I really pushed for that now looking back on it. I think it just felt like this record was all about experimenting with, for lack of a better term, empty space. And I thought this song really captured that in a really unique way. It's just very simple. As Above, So Below was really like the brainchild of Steve. He really took this one home and decided that he wanted to do something that was piano-based and sort of write the rest of the song around what the piano was doing. And we added a whole bunch of layers on top of it, but ultimately that piano line really drives it.
Can you talk about As Above, So Below?
Oh, yeah, man.
Yeah, I know.
This reminded me, I wanted to recreate a song on piano that I loved. I'm trying to remember the name of the song. Okay, so there's an artist out there called Arvo, and he's a minimalist, and he can make an 8-minute piece feel like nothing. And, time will just fly, because he'll just hit this one chord forever until you're used to, I don't know, just simple chord structures that are just really effective. I kind of wanted to emulate that sort of minimalism, where it was just centered around this one thing. Game of Thrones, too, if we're gonna talk about it. Ramin Djawadi, I think that's how you say his name. Yeah, I guess Arvo and Game of Thrones.
The last track on the record is a song called Were, and this one was another one that was sort of Steve's brainchild. He'd been really experimenting with synthesizers for the last year or 2 years or so, and he really wanted to take this one home, and he made this really long piece that eventually got trimmed down.
This is when I started to get really into building beats in Pro Tools, and I would do the same thing where I'd start with piano, because especially in the box, that's just the easiest thing to do for me. From there, I filled it out with some ARP bass.
And somewhere in there, we decided to add electronic drums. We decided to add guitar.
That sound at the end is the Omnichord. We ran through a bunch of pedals, and then it has that magnetic bar that you can run your finger across and it arpeggiates whatever chord you're holding down. There wasn't as much structure as there was free form. But I don't know, with Fresh Years, I don't know. I enjoy it. I'm happy with what we did.
Cool.
Hey, thanks for listening to. I don't know what are we listening to?
This is just the end of the whole thing. Like the waiting
Hey.
room commentary thing.
Thanks for listening to the Waiting Room Commentary. This is Pray for Sound signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Waiting Room Commentary. I hope you're able to get something out of it and get a little bit more from the songs. And we really appreciate everyone that supports our band. So thank you so much for listening.